Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. William White, yes, another member of the North American Dogman Project science team. This is always epic to nerd out with scientists, and I cannot wait to go hunt the Dogman. Absolutely delicious. And now that has been attended to, it is once again time for William and myself to take a walk into the darkness.
It stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf, and everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, once again you have found your way into the darkness of the fox den to sit around the late night fire and burn the timber with the Midnight Society as we again read a few chapters as to what's occurring across the globe with the Dogman tonight. Yes, it is time for a member of our science team, William White, to find his way through the foggy and dense forest to sit down and talk with us. He is going to explain some things that are occurring down in South America. Well, my guy, how the heck you been?
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, that's a great intro, considering right now at the moment I am in South America.
Yes, isn't that cool? That's why I figured since you were down there, I would send you a few things that I had been nerding out, and that happened to be one of the areas in my brain I had spent some time recently.
Yeah.
Figured you might want to hear about some of that stuff.
Yep, for those who don't know, and I suppose most people who don't know me personally don't know, my wife is from Brazil, and so we'd like to do it every year, but every couple of years at least, we'd come down to Brazil to spend time with her family and just reconnect and give our kids the opportunity to kind of get the feel of the culture and the language. So yeah, that's what we're doing right now over the holidays. But yeah, there's a lot of cool lore, cool legends, really interesting stuff. And the fun thing about them, is there's a lot of similarities between what we know about European werewolf lore and vampire lore and the Native Americans up in North America and their lore. And it's all very similar to a lot of the stuff that we got going on down here. So, I like making connections. I think that strengthens the case.
That is some excellent stuff right there. And do me a favor, once you do get a chance, remind me to send you, I believe here at the North American Dogman Project, we got the go-to for the potential Dogman evidence, I believe, recently over in Siberia in the permafrost.
Ooh, wow.
Well, I was very blessed, to get a chance to speak some of these individuals. I mean, they did publish what is published out there, but let's keep in mind, unfortunately, this is Russia, so I don't necessarily know if I'm going to get the final outcome of this, but what I have gotten already is that this is an 18,000-year-old canine that they cannot figure out where it fits in. They don't have anything to suggest that it fits in anywhere. And it is midnight, pitch black, with long white fangs. And it also has a little bit of an elongation on the back of its skull. So pretty interesting stuff. I mean, they are very optimistic that it has nothing to do with what else they found because of the pristine condition it's in. yes, it's only the head, but when they do have parts of other canines and wolves, etc., it doesn't
Hmm.
fit whatsoever. So
Yeah.
they do know that it obviously is some sort of canine, but it doesn't fit in anywhere. So they're trying to run some more tests on it. And like I said, I will send you the picture. Actually,
Yeah,
make
for sure.
our Spelunker is a great artist, and she did a reproduction of it from freehand, so I can show that image. But I also do have the actual image as well. But just with the fact, even though they sent it to me, I don't play with copyright just because YouTube has no kindness for anything along the
No,
line.
especially for little creators like yourself, man. There's no mercy.
Yeah, straight up, boom, dispose of me. But either way, like I said, if hopefully I get to speak to them a little bit more, but even with what they've presented us right there, I mean, it looks honestly identical to what some people have described. So I just figured you might
Cool.
find it to be pretty interesting, dude.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that should be really cool. I mean, not that we'll ever know any details about it, because, like you said, Russia. But I mean, there's got to be preserved intact DNA in there. That's the cool thing about the permafrost is that, I mean, it's like a deep freeze. So we have mammoth DNA because they've found fully preserved mammoths in the ice. So this thing should be no different.
It is beautiful, and they recently have found a steam cave lion and all kinds of cool stuff, which it's unfortunate though because obviously we need ice, but it is super
Hmm.
cool that they're finding these, so it's a catch 22. But we are going to head down to where you're chilling at right now, and I wanted to just toss you the mic because I'm here to blow my brain up with
Yeah,
knowledge.
there
Yeah.
you go.
You are here
I
to
will be your proverbial shotgun of knowledge.
let's go,
Um,
man.
Yeah, so down here, it turns out that the werewolf legend, if you will, is extremely strong in Brazil, despite the fact that there are actually no native wolves in most of South America, including Brazil. There is a canid type animal called a maned wolf, but it's actually not even closely related to dogs and wolves. It's more closely related to foxes. Kind of looks like a fox with long legs. Um, but that's about it. So, despite that fact, both the Native American tribes, the Guarani, they're the predominant Native American tribe that was all across Brazil before colonization, and the Portuguese and Spanish colonizers had strong werewolf lores. Obviously, the Europeans, had it because it's a common legend in Europe overall, and Spain and Portugal are no different. But the fascinating thing is that the Guarani had their own legend before they ever came in contact with the Europeans. Um, and because of that, it is a very prevalent theme, especially in, let's say, the earlier days of Brazil. There were a lot of reports and sightings, and mothers telling their children not to go out after dark and stuff because they call it a lobisomem, which is literally wolfman in Portuguese, which I speak Portuguese quite well, and even in recent years, there have been some very interesting sightings, including a fairly legendary and famous, and as far as I know, not debunked photo from, I believe it was 2014, of a very strange looking creature walking through a street at night. So yeah, there is a ton of werewolf lore, legend, and perhaps evidence down here in Brazil. In fact, there's a city in the northeastern part of Brazil called Tauá, I think is how you pronounce it. It's in the state of Ceará, and they have. Uh, I don't know if there's been anything super recent, but as of about 2012, 2014, they had scores of werewolf sightings there. It has become unofficially known, or maybe officially known, depending on who you ask, as the werewolf capital of Brazil. Um, so yeah, there's some cool stuff. I know for a fact that Jody has been contacted by at least a couple Brazilians who have had sightings and wanted to talk with him, and he tried to get me into contact with them. It's not that easy sometimes when you're in the States, but yeah, there is something going on down here. Um, the doubters would tell you, well, that's just the the lore that came from the colonizers, the werewolf lore, and people are seeing things in the shadows that aren't really there. That could be, though that photo from 2014 is something. Um, and then, the fact that the natives also had their own werewolf lore, which, goes along with a lot of the stuff from Central America and the southwest states of the United States, where the werewolf is somewhat of a spiritual being, a witch. They can be good, they can be bad. It all depends on the individual and what they do with their power, but it's very, very similar to so much of the rest of the Native American tribes that seem to have these, if you want to call them skinwalkers, you want to call them brujas, werewolves. They all have this pattern to it that seems very, very similar. Now, it could be that's because they all more or less were connected, a few thousand years ago, and as the Americas were populated after the Ice Age, maybe that's why. But I personally think that it's because they're all experiencing and seeing the same thing is why the evidence corroborates itself. So,
Yeah, some pretty gnarly stuff for sure right there. And before we continue a little bit, have you heard of the lore down in South America as well?
oh, like Central America and Mexico with the
So,
Nawal.
yeah, it's about a white version that is supposed to be a female that
Oh
more or
no.
less, I guess, docile and kind of the
Hmm.
protector of not allowing these ones to take us. Because in this lore, there's old paintings as well where you see the jet black ones with the bright red eyes, and then you see the lighter color ones with the blue eyes stepping in more or less, allowing the person to get away or calming the male down and such. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I just didn't
That
know if you
is.
had a chance to hear anything about
No,
that
I
down.
hadn't heard about that one. That is interesting. And what else is interesting is that the description that everyone's giving, whether it's the Guarani Indians here in Brazil or the Portuguese and their descendants, is so similar to what people are seeing in North America. They describe these things as being 7 feet tall to 8 feet tall. I mean, that's like right on the nose for what everyone's seeing. Having long arms, being able to walk on two legs, walk on four legs. Um, that is, because obviously, you could have like the Lon Chaney werewolf where it's just a teenager in a sports jacket with a hairy face and some fangs, right? Or you could have the Van Helsing werewolf. There's so much difference. That if they were seeing something totally different down here, you'd think it was something totally different. But they're seeing what seems to be the same thing that we're seeing in Ohio and Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin and these Great Lakes states where it's so common. Mississippi, where it seems like there's migration. So yeah, I hadn't heard of that white one. It's an interesting thought, and I mean I could go into long tangents about theories about where these things may or may not have come from on a spiritual or ancient alien level, and maybe some of them are protectors and some of them are rogue, and I don't know. But that is interesting.
Yeah, no, for sure. That is straight up really bizarre stuff. And actually, before I ask you the next question, Dennis Carroll, our occult specialist, he
Uh-huh.
was really helping me understand that, well, when it comes to werewolves and the manifestations, you have different versions that seem
Right.
to be more of like the Wolfman type one, meaning, yeah, it's werewolfish, but it looks like personish, so kind of like ocephali and such
Right.
are more reported to, have the hyena heads, dog heads, wolf heads, and actually, even some that have the whole entire canine body. So they're
Hmm.
looking more like the ones from the Howling, I feel like. And what it's really interesting too is that case with Bobby Businger down in Texas, actually Vidor. I believe it was in like the late 70s, early 80s, and he was finally able to speak about it. And he was talking about how there was a large man that would howl at the moon and come and bang so hard on the side of his cabin that it would legit wake him and his wife up and knock over all the dishes, and that it was terrifying. And long story short, I mean, anyone wants to hear more about it, I've covered it. But he had a friend that had guard dogs, brought the guard dogs in. This guy came in and ripped the guard dogs apart. Same thing,
Hmm.
howl. Eventually, the officers caught him and then came over and told Bobby that they found him walking down the highway covered in blood because obviously apparently he couldn't feel pain. So some of it was the animal's blood, but then some was his, I guess. And he was a big steroid maniac that was crazy and he was in an insane asylum. Interesting stuff. But back then they went with the whole werewolf thing, but it still sounds bizarre with like
Sounds kind of like the Viking berserker stuff, where they didn't necessarily transform into wolves, but they became, if you will, for lack of a better word, possessed by like a wolf or animalistic spirit, and then went berserk and did insane things on the battlefield, and then afterwards, if they survived, they kind of went back to normal. So it sounds almost like that.
Mm-hmm. That's why it was pretty interesting. And the question I did want to ask back with, like I had mentioned, the females being docile, etc. Not a biologist. I don't have the most experience with wild animals, but I do enjoy animals outside. So whether it's crows, ravens, local squirrels, etc., neighbors' dogs, whatever. I've always noticed, maybe it's just the way nature is, that the females tend to be a little bit harder to get them to connect with you, but once they do, there's, I wouldn't say a deeper connection than the males. It seems like the males take a little bit more of an opportunistic approach. Do you think there's anything to that, like meaning out in the wild, for example?
I do, and I think in the case of mammals, and once again, I'm not the biologist, but mammals take care of their young, right? They're bonded to their young. It's why we survive. The mothers produce milk and raise the pups or babies until they're strong enough to survive on their own. And so I think that may be part of why the females take longer to connect with us as humans on a deep level, because, I think their brains are wired to devote everything to their young. And so, they're like holding back resources, basically, just in case they have young, right? They don't want to have their I'm talking on a subconscious level, on an instinctual level, not a conscious level. Nature doesn't want them to have their loyalty split between these humans or these other things that are not their young and are not passing on their DNA, and, they're young. My mom, and I take it for what it's worth, but she was always convinced that once you spayed a female dog, that they were much better family dogs, that they just, because then you're taking away the organs which are producing the majority of their hormones, the reproductive hormones, and so those hormones are no longer dictating their life, and that theory, may or may not be correct, but kind of on an instinctual level makes sense to me,
That's some great stuff, and leads me into my next question for you. So when it comes to wild predation out in, nature, where unfortunately an animal predator obviously consumes a person, I wish there was a way to figure out if it was more male-based or female-based, because obviously females, if you come near their cubs, sure.
Right.
Would, again, almost think that the majority of, say, tiger attacks got to be males, or the majority of black bear attacks got to be males. I mean, I could be incorrect, but...
that's actually a really good question. I can't give you a certain answer on that. You're right. Obviously, you're much more likely to be attacked by any wild animal, whether it's a predator or a prey animal, if you're posing a threat to their young, and in the case of a female. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because they say, and I oftentimes am skeptical of what they say, but it's said that it's very rare for animals to actually predate upon humans for the sake of nutrition and consuming our flesh. Doesn't make sense to me. Our flesh is as good as anyone else's flesh, right? But and we're slow, and don't excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. We're slow and don't have the best natural defenses, So it would be really interesting to find out if there is a difference between attacks based upon the sex of the animal,
Right. And I'm going to actually back up your thought process here with facts. And that's what I'm all about. There is actually a ton of studies that once a predator tastes man or humankind, they actually enjoy it because we have a high salt content. And whether people want to accept it or not, that is essential for animals.
Oh, yeah.
And what do you mean, Star Fox? Well, just go watch any sort of anything that, whether you have Geographics or David Attenborough, it doesn't matter. There's salt mines in the middle of the
Salt is
jungle.
so important for pretty much
And just,
everyone who's alive. Yeah.
yes, exactly. So there's no reason. I don't know how many times I have to reiterate this to people. We as people are the ones that are like, oh, that's dark when the bear rips you apart. Oh, no, they're our friends. Dude, at the end of the day, it doesn't make the bear evil. The bear is not evil, but they don't care. They don't have some sort of moral twist that we have, okay? So when humans are out in nature, I hate to break it to anybody out there. You're on the food chain. That doesn't make an animal evil, okay? We're talking about nature. Don't go out in nature, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or go out prepared. Have me when I'm out in the woods or the mountains. I have a firearm with me, and a knife, and maybe an axe. The axe is usually for camping and stuff like that. But what do we have? We've got soft little fingernails that break and short little teeth that aren't, and mouths that aren't really great for aggressively grabbing things. And our strength to weight ratio isn't the best. Yeah, you got to use what God gave us, or evolution gave us, which is our brains, which is technology. So yeah, if
Right.
you're not willing to assume responsibility for yourself when you're outside, then yeah, stay inside. It's fine.
Wait, you don't mean you don't go out in the woods, William, just by yourself, and then when this mountain lion comes, bad kitty, and you expect it to just go away? I mean, come on, right?
I mean,
Like you,
that's like plan C, making myself big and shouting and, hoping that it goes away because everything else failed or I forgot to do something important that day. But yeah, that's, me, I'd rather have the assurance of knowing that I could put heavy caliber bullet through it at a fairly high speed. That's my assurance.
yes, you go with that. You don't go with the whole Three Stooges aspect, okay? I mean, it doesn't work like that. And also, I think another thing too that people totally forget is like, well, scream as loud as you can. I always chuckle at that. You don't think the elk or whatever is being
Yeah,
consumed screaming as loud as it can too? What does that do?
that's true. Yeah, I mean, shoot, the scream of a rabbit, the scream of, prey animals like that can actually trigger more predation in the case of like wolves or pack animals or even other animals that are there to scavenge from, the primary predator. You're right. That may have the opposite effect in some ways. So,
I mean, as far as I know, you're always told to be quiet, correct? So, I mean,
yeah.
it just doesn't, again, for as smart as we seem to think we are, we also do very unintelligent things. Like, I wanted to send it to you, but I sent it to Sir Brian Bowden instead, and he was laughing so hard. But it was these two people that decided to, in Wild Africa, for their YouTube podcast or whatever, put two of themselves in a zebra get up and
Oh
run
no.
as this pack of freaking lions is right around there. And what do you think happens? Of course, the female lions come up and start whooping their butt cheeks. These guys get out, and I asked Brian, I'm like, dude, how do people like this even make it that far to
Yeah.
podcast? And he's like, they usually don't. It's called selection of the fittest. And I was like, I know, right?
Oh man, yeah, Africa is wild. Kind of a little bit off topic. I remember watching a documentary about these two experienced kayakers, and they were kayaking Lake Tanganyika, I think is it. Anyway, famous African lake. They were kayaking this river system that drains into this lake, and this lake has a huge population of crocodiles, and so does the river system that goes into it. And the two of them are kayaking along, and the one guy who survived said he kind of heard something, didn't even hear a scream, just heard, a commotion maybe, and looked behind him where his buddy should be, and his kayak was there, flipped over, and he wasn't in it. And he's, what he assumes happened, what likely happened was a large crocodile popped its head out, pulled him right out of the kayak, and that was that. Africa is wild, man. You are so far from the top of the food chain when you're in Africa. So
Right. And that actually, again, though, ties into what we do talk about here, because that's why I state that if hyenas are able to, get out of there by people that are, unintelligent and decided to just take them as pets, let them loose, whatever. Yes, there has to be a breeding population, but you take something out of Africa like a hyena. And again, people don't know they're the most dominant predators. Okay. Check it up yourself. 90% success ratio, huge packs. It's not the king of
yep.
the jungle lion, okay? The hyenas legit rule Africa, okay? So now you take them away from, like you said, where everything's trying to consume you, because even though hyenas are dope, well, crocodiles still them too, and they still get unalived by lions as well. Whatever. Africa is a place that everything is out for num 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 on everybody. But let's take
Oh
them
yeah.
out, put them in Texas. Let's put them in California. Let's put them in the Pacific Northwest. Let's put them in Arizona. And people don't realize that it actually gets cold in Africa too. Okay.
Oh
And
yeah.
if people believe that, I'm a big fan of Cody Lundeen. He's a survivalist who lives down in Arizona and explains how very cold it does get down there too. Okay. And that he's even had snow down in certain parts there.
I've seen snow in Arizona myself. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, like, verified right there. These things, do occur. And it's just interesting, like, to see the aspects and like the location and the type of different temperatures and just areas these things, do occur in. But people don't understand that a hyena, as long as it's got a healthy breeding population, is going to be okay. And
Oh
again,
yeah.
here's the thing I'm trying to work on too. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're a geologist. The whole entire world, whether people would like to really accept it or not, is pretty much proven by science until somebody else can show me different, where it's built on layers. Well, what do you mean, Star Fox? Well, walk into a cave. No, don't really do that unless you have proper training and people with you. But okay, does that not show you layers and where do caves
Yeah.
go? Okay, yes, all right. And if William and I were very lucky, we could dive into the ocean and pop up into an underground cave and get Jack Sparrow's treasures.
There you
Uh,
go.
but the cave is there though, where you can then walk and wait a second, you don't go back underneath water. Okay. So recently in Saudi Arabia, we have that cave system, the lava tube that, well, I like the Smithsonian, but I also understand that they have been accused of withholding things. But wait a second, they even published this. Wow. So what makes there be more information that we're not being shared here? But by mistake, they found this lava tube, and there for the past 7,000 years are massive amounts of human and some animal bones mixed in there that hyenas are pulling back up in there. Whoa, wait a second, time out. Unless people just haven't properly documented them, there aren't supposed to be spotted hyenas which do that behavior in Saudi Arabia. Striped hyenas and the other versions are solo for the most part, unless they're mating,
Hmm.
and they are scavengers. The spotted hyenas are the hunters that drag these bad boys back to their dens and caves, and yeah, let's get the job done. So, okay, are they not being documented? Or is it really that hard to think that they could easily enter a cave system in Africa and it goes down underneath the ocean and pops up in Saudi Arabia? Wait a second, Star Fox, that can't happen. Well, down in Boston, bro. Well, you know what we did down there? There was an area underneath Back Bay. We needed to expand so we could have some more traffic going through. There was already a natural deposit that went underneath Back Bay. We converted it, and now a portion of our little highway goes underneath Back Bay. So that right
Yep.
there, again, kind of simplified what I was trying to say. How do you feel about that, man?
Yeah, it's feasible. Absolutely. I mean, there's the cave systems here in North America. Well, here where you are in North America, um, in Kentucky and Ohio and that part of the country. There's literally thousands and thousands of miles of natural caves that connect. Like I said, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky. Guess what? Ohio and Indiana, or Ohio and Kentucky, are separated by a pretty big river. I mean, it's not as big as the Mississippi, but the Ohio River is a significant body of water, and there are caves, natural tunnels that go underneath it, formed by the process of, a slightly acidic water slowly dissolving limestone over thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of years. Um, so yeah, it's absolutely possible with lava tubes. Volcanic systems can be, massive, and you mix in, millions of years, multiple events. Like, all you have to do is look at Yellowstone. The whole southeastern part of Idaho, there's an area called the Snake River Valley. And Idaho is mountainous. Utah, south of Idaho, is mountainous. Wyoming, to the east of Idaho, is mountainous. Montana, mountainous. This southeastern chunk of Idaho is this smooth, broad, wide valley that's perfect for, well, valley. I mean, it's a flat plain, really, perfect for farming. Well, how did that get there in the middle of the mountains? Well, Yellowstone. Basically, as the continent moved across the hot spot of Yellowstone over millions of years, Yellowstone erupted multiple times over tens of millions of years, and literally just blasted that area smooth. So I'm not certain, but I'm guessing there are probably volcanic lava tubes that stretch all the way across that plain into the current location of Yellowstone. I mean, there are lava tubes that when I went to college in that area, there are lava tubes that we would go and explore and hang out and camp and kind of have fun events and parties and stuff in these lava tubes big enough to stand up in. They exist. And like I said, there's no reason to doubt that they probably connect one way or another over hundreds and hundreds of miles. So yeah, it absolutely is possible that there could be an even larger network of such tubes in that part of the world.
That's great stuff right there. And something else, two things actually. That image I sent you earlier, where you and Jody had said you're pretty optimistic that it is fake. I did as much research as possible, and I'm definitely agreeing with that, but I don't think it was intentional. I found out it's definitely a gentleman in a foreign country, but from what I understand, I can't really read these languages the best. I have a hard time with English sarcasm, just kidding. But he more or less was trying to make a replica of something he and some people saw, that they're claiming saw a mummified being with a head like that. And it was actually down in your neck of the woods where you are right now. I don't believe it was in Brazil, but it's somewhere down in South America, like Peru or something. I don't know. So it's pretty interesting, man, because yes, it does, obviously, as far as we know, is not a real render of it, but
Right.
bizarre because, I mean, the sound of everywhere.
That was something that was very common in like Victorian, late 18th century England. I remember a few years ago, a collection of weird conglomerations of bodies, not human bodies usually, but animal parts that have been stitched together and made to look like a werewolf or a fairy, or basically this collection of these, this weird taxidermy went up for sale when its owner passed away, and it was put on one of these large estate auctions. And some guy in England who had collected them or inherited them from whoever originally did it. So yeah, that type of thing is not abnormal, and it's not even necessarily a deliberate hoax, like you said. It could be because they're trying to represent something that they heard of or saw or believed in, or what have you, or it's just they enjoy doing that type of work. So yeah,
exactly. But then the other person who gets their hands on it, doesn't understand that because they didn't really know, and they're like, oh goodness, and oh geez, it's funny you said that. I can't believe I was forced to do this in school, but they brought us to a place where it was deceased people, and they were in glass, and they'd like cut them up into layers where they were opening up.
Yeah, I've heard of that exhibit.
I'm like, what the heck to my teacher? I'm like, what the Christmas are you doing to us right now? But yes, that's straight up bizarre because of science, but again, that's more gory than any horror movie I've seen. Literally, the body is put together into a, and then it's just split up into little slivers. And I mean, sure, yes, it was for obviously science, but I can only imagine, man, back then, obviously, I understood what I was seeing, but if people didn't, they'd be like, what the heck? And that also reminds me, as we're getting towards the end here, that in Africa, too, they have two different versions of werehyenas, okay? And the one I mentioned to you is the cynocephaly version, where this thing is an actual bipedal hominoid hyena thing that wears shaggy clothing and cloaks and such, and acts if you need to trade. And picture in a video game, yes, I'm a nerd, I don't play as much as I used to, but the action adventure games, like the merchant that might be on the outside of town that's pretty close to the town, but not up in there. Well, that's what these would do, okay? They would call you over with motions and act like they're going to trade with you, or they need help or something, or walk off, and then the unthinkable would occur for the individuals that would come over and such. And these were actually hominoid hyenas that were stealing people and pulling them back into the caves. Man, falls right back into that whole cynocephaly thing. And the more I read about them, they definitely were eating the fallen and did have some rumor to be consuming people too. So I don't know.
I had read that report too. I think it was from the supposed Roman general or whoever had recorded their encounter, or maybe it was Herodotus. But I remember reading that kind of part of their payment, especially when they were being used as mercenaries. So yeah.
which is so bizarre. And I thought I might have sent it to you, but you're probably gonna have already seen it. But there was a bipedal black bear that was up in New
You sent me
Jersey.
that picture.
Yes, okay. And Jody knew about it as well. Apparently, unfortunately, according to Jody, some bozo decided to shoot it up in Pennsylvania instead
Yeah, I
of
heard about that.
figure out
And
what's
I think
going
that was
on.
fairly frequent or fairly recent. So
Yes, but it was walking around, no problems whatsoever, just looking like a dog man in some of the pictures. Honestly,
basically,
Jediah National Forest, you know that image that we have up on there of that
uh
supposed dog man that is one of our quality kind of ones. When I look at that image and I look at that walking bear, dude, it looks just like it. And I'm not saying that, all bears would be walking like that, but I have another prime example of that giant grizzly bear where that tour bus, I don't know exactly where it was, but this was not a trained grizzly bear. That thing just got up and walked like what, 15, 20 yards by this
oh
bus.
yeah.
No problem whatsoever. So that's a
I
pretty
mean, they
decent.
don't walk as gracefully as we do. You know, we evolved to have that be the primary way we do it. But yeah, they can absolutely, walk on two legs. Yeah. So there's a kind of connected to that. I remember years ago there was a black lab, and I don't remember if she was born without her front legs or if somehow she lost them in an accident. But basically, she learned how to exist on her hind legs, and she walked around everywhere on her hind legs because she didn't have any front legs, and basically lived a happy life and was taken care of by people and part of their family and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not impossible that an animal could learn to function, maybe learn to even be more effective at it than the average member of the species too, if it just for whatever reason took to that or had an injury or something that encouraged it to act that way. So
Right. And that is just something I feel like we got to look at because I'm all about science and logic. And I have gotten to the point, with the cynocephaly and such. I do think something's going on there. But the more I dive in with biologists and the science team, such as yourself, and learn animal behavior, especially prehistoric and modern day predator behaviors, animals do walk up on two legs sometimes. And when
yeah,
I like
wolves are
that,
well known to do it actually. Not necessarily for long distances and not at the speed that people claim they see these dogmen move at. But yeah, apparently wolves will stand up on their hind legs. Because a big wolf standing on its hind legs ought to be 5.5, 6 feet tall. That lets it see over tall grass and bushes and better see the prey that it's looking for. So yeah, they'll do that.
and whether people agree with evolution or not, that's up to them. Again, I'm a scientific mind, so I do, and I have reasons I would
Hmm.
gladly talk to anyone about at points in time. But there are numerous species that started off in the water, came onto land for a bit, and then went back into the water because it obviously was better for their species. So the reason I say
Yep.
that is when it comes to hyenas, they are not feline or canines. They are related to mongoose, ferrets, weasels, things that enjoy being around trees, up in trees, down in the ground.
Yeah,
So
yeah. A lot of
really,
those animals are really good at digging holes, and they like to live in holes and tunnels and nest in there. So yeah, there you go.
yeah, so is it really that far-fetched to then think at some point in time some sort of species of hyena could have started using trees again as well? And would that not take down on some of the tracks, etc.? Because I mean, any sort of known
Good.
predator, for the most part, doesn't want to show its tracks. I mean, look at your house cat outside that just goes takes a dump or something, it covers it up because it
Covers
doesn't
it
want,
up.
right? So it almost seems like usually bears and just the straight up most dominant predators who don't care leave their tracks around. But for the most part, anything that's trying to be stealthy doesn't.
Yep, you're right about that because yeah, that's how predators track animals a lot of times is by they get their scent from their spoor. That's what it's called, in like tracking and hunting circles. But yeah, absolutely.
Great stuff, man. And well, before we let you go, one of the last questions I would like to ask is pretty much you have a lot in common with the thought process I have. Where do you stand, I guess, with this whole entire topic? Do you feel like there has to be some sort of misunderstanding, misinterpretation, people trying to understand things, and some known animal stuff, and also maybe some
Yeah.
unknown stuff? Or do you think it's just all a bunch of tinfoil stuff that some people say?
So I think I'm going to say a lot of people's sightings and experiences are probably a misunderstanding of some more normal natural phenomenon. But I do think that a certain percentage, a small percentage of them are, fall into the realm of cryptozoology and the, if you will, the supernatural. Um, I like, yeah, humans, it's called pareidolia. It's where, you see the clouds and you see a shape. One of those clouds looks like a car, or, one time I woke up in the middle of the night. I grew my hair out shoulder length during COVID, and I saw the most horrific looking, banshee wraith, ghost looking thing in the corner of my room, and I kind of freaked out. And then I realized it was actually just a long strand of my hair that had, fallen across my face, right? So my brain interpreted that. We do that all the time. It's pattern recognition, and sometimes the pattern's off or our recognition is off. In fact, probably a lot of times. But I do think that there have been some very valid sightings and experiences, and we can't discount them all. And I think it's really healthy of us to go into it skeptically, to go into it saying, not all of these are necessarily real. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, so I'm not saying that even most of these people, are hoaxers or just want attention. I don't think that's the case. I think that, we as human beings make mistakes, and that's not like, oh, we should do better. No, evolution did that to us. We need to be able to make very quick judgments and decisions, because that, let us survive for thousands and thousands and millions of years. Because if you overthink something too long, then you do get eaten by the crocodile, when you're floating down the river in your canoe, right? You need to recognize the patterns and say, those bubbles coming out of the water, that's probably a crocodile. I better pull my boat off to the shore and get out of here, that sort of thing. So I mean, we're only human, and we have to work with the software and hardware that that means. But there definitely is something going on in the world that we are trying to understand better.
That's great stuff. And just to give everyone an example of science and such as we close this out, look at the Bermuda Triangle, okay? The Bermuda Triangle is a very interesting place. Everyone can look it up, right? What I'm going to just say right now is everyone wants to think there is something supernatural going on there, okay? And sure, could there be? Yes, but there is numerous scientists that are way smarter than myself could ever be, and they have all sat down and put their brilliant minds together. And also, it happens other places. There are big balls of methane down in the ocean that are underneath the crust, okay? And once the crust moves a little bit, well, what happens to these methane? It raises up, and methane is what? Oh, you can't see it. Well, if a large airplane or any sort of airplane or boat happened to go directly into one of these methane bloops coming up from the bottom, they instantly blow the hell up, dude. And you would never then find the remains down there because no one's really tried to dive down in there. So there's a lot of plausible scientific reasoning and examples of how if your engine is going with combustion and such and you add all kinds of methane in there, that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Basically, that goes along the lines of all technology would appear to be magic to someone a couple generations before who didn't understand what that technology was doing. If you showed electricity to someone from the, say, 1600s, a couple hundred years before electricity was kind of harnessed and developed by modern man, they would probably assume it was some form of magic or alchemy or just
he's a witch.
Exactly. And I'm sure that when someone shows, if someone from 500 years in the future were to show me free energy technology, I would know it wasn't magic, but it would seem like magic because I would have no way of understanding it from my own viewpoint. So yeah, until we understand something, it's always going to seem supernatural and magical.
Great stuff, man. And thank you so much for hanging out with us, even though you are on vacation and supposedly enjoying yourself, but you do enjoy this topic. So this is great.
Yeah, this is fun.
Sit down, man. Fun. Appreciate you, bro. So do me a favor and enjoy the rest of your vacation for sure. And let's link up here again in a few, man.
Yeah, just whenever you want. Monday nights should be good for me, anytime really, whether I'm here or at home. It's kind of cool down. Our vacation, the first couple weeks we spent on the beach, and now we're just hanging out in my wife's hometown. So, not as much fun and excitement, just more family get together stuff.
Why, thank you to every legend that did make it this far tonight. If you do enjoy my content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Feed the algorithm, and I will catch you very soon.